What's up, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages? Pat here again with another limited overview. This is for Draft Box 4, also known as Dragon Brawl. Today we'll be going to go over the red cards. You might be asking, why am I doing one of these? Well, one, a lot of you guys really enjoyed it the last time, so I figured, hey, I'd do it again. And two, if you're locals like mine, you'll be playing Dragon Brawl as your format, replacing Constructed pretty much for the entirety of the month of October. And third, I guess, we don't know what Nationals format is. Other games like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! In the past have used Draft as half of the format for Nationals. So it behooves you to learn these cards and figure out which ones are the best ones that you can use. Going to put the grading scale up on the screen right now for those of you guys who haven't seen it. I grade cards on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is the best, 1 is the worst, 5 is at least playable. We always want to shoot for 5 or better, 7 or better if possible. I'll let you guys read the specifics on the screen. Many of you guys at 3xG Patreon, Discord let me know that you want me to go over not only the new cards, but the old reprints for Draftbox. So I'm going to try and go at a much faster pace. Two things though before I jump into it. I want to give a shout out to 3xG Productions and Shenron's Lair sponsor, Alec Pastrana and Bearded Collectibles. Those guys, if you're looking for sealed product for Draft Box 4, check out beardedcollectibles.com. They're going to have the best prices for you guys. They're going to be able to hook you up with all the cards you want for this set, any singles as well. So definitely give Alec a shout out. Excellent guy. Looking forward to hanging out with him again this weekend in Orlando. Second off, if you do enjoy this and do find this helpful, consider subscribing, liking, and commenting the video. It really helps us out here at 3xG quite a lot. So with that out of the way, let us jump into the cards. So, first up here is Son Goku, Might of Many. 5 cost for a 16k critical is not the best rate. He does, however, have permanent. This card gets +3 power for each skillless battle card in your drop area, and if there are 2 or more skillless battle cards in your drop area, reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 2. So, 30k skillless cards are the name of the game at the common level. So they are the best commons. You are always going to want to be shooting for those. They're the haymakers, the first pick commons. Like if you're going to ever first pick a common in packs, you'll probably hear me say this a lot. First picking is basically the first card you take out of a pack when drafting. 30k commons, skillless cards are amongst the only commons I would ever take first pick, which means that they are in high demand and they are very powerful and they are the centerpiece of the format. This card plays off of that and is critical and gets pretty big to boot. He does require some setup, and odds are you're probably only going to have 2 to 3 skillless battle cards in any given deck anyway. So I'm going to give Son Goku, Might of the Many, a 7. I think it is a good card, and I definitely think you should jam it if you have it, but only if you have at least 3 skillless cards, and those are going to be a hot commodity, especially if you're fighting with someone at the table for red if you're trying to share the colors. So you might only get 1 or 2 of them. Next up is SS Vegeta, Exploiting Weakness. This card is a constructed monster. This is basically the Toa Slayer, I feel like. So 5 cost for a 19k, has counterplay. If your leader is red, reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 2, and then auto, when you play this card, choose all of your opponent's battle cards. They get minus 20,000 power for the duration of the turn, and if it's your opponent's turn, choose up to 1 of your leader cards, and it gets plus 5k power for the duration of the turn. As far as I know, as of the recording of this video, there is only 1 leader in Draft Box 4, and he's Rainbow, so this card is always live. You can basically always take this card, no matter what. It is a board clear for 3, and a built-in Senzu. That's a little bit hard to do in draft because at most you're going to only have 2 energy usually open. You're never really just holding 3 up. It's super telegraphed at that point. So this card isn't like the absolute like bomb best thing ever in limited. It's not like it is in constructed. In constructed, I think this is a format changing card. And for that, I would probably give it a 9 or a 10. But for here, this does not auto-win the game, and it has answers. So when we think of 10 drops, I think of cards that are literally unbeatable. It's almost impossible when you put it on the table for your opponent to have any hope of coming back. That said, Vegeta is really strong, and if you do see him, he is definitely worth first picking and building your entire deck around. So for that reason, I'm going to give him a 9. He's kind of insane, and I think he's probably the best card overall in the set. It's either that or one of the cards in yellow, but really insane card. Next up is Trunks, Deluge of Power. 2 cost for a 10k. If your battle card in battle is red, when you combo with this card, it gets plus 5k power for the duration of the turn. So this is pretty good if you have a surplus of red. There's a cycle of these. 2 cost for a 10k is at least a 5. It's a playable rate. This is a 10k if your deck is strongly concentrated on the red color. Like if you have a surplus of red battle cards, especially ones like the 30k single strike vanilla skills cards like we were talking about earlier, this card is absolutely great in those scenarios. That said, defensively it's pretty lacking, but what can you really expect for a common? I'm going to give pretty much this whole cycle a 6. I think you should slot 1 or 2 of these in your deck as a combat trick. For those of you guys who don't know what a combat trick is, it's basically, as the name implies, when you're in combat, it's something you can use to kind of trick or surprise your opponent to give you the upper hand. So like 1 or 2 of these to get the advantage when they're not expecting it on the attack. To force through 1 or 2 critical damage is pretty good. Next up is Giru. Like all of these in the cycle, 1 cost 10Ks are actually okay for the first 3 turns of the game because your opponent is, they're not awakened yet, so they actually have some value, and you need to have some kind of filler somewhere. You could do a lot worse than this on 1, namely most of the 1-drops that try to search for a specific card and whiff. Giru is a safer pick and is basically like your bottom barrel filler. Like this is like the lowest bar you want to go when you're building your deck in draft. Next up is Majin Buu, the Reincarnator. 4 costs for a 15k is a terrible rate. However, when you play this card, choose up to 1 red battle card with an energy cost of 3 or less in your drop and play it. So he gets a 2 for 1. So if you can, get Grandpa Gohan or any of the other pretty sizable red battle cards, there's a couple other ones in the set that are pretty good. There's even some super rares such as Fearless Pan that you can grab with him that will really bolster his utility. This is definitely a build around card if you are heavy in red and you have the necessary pieces, like you have 2 Grandpa Gohans. He's kind of a rock star in that regard. I would give him a 7 for what his usual playability is basically a 7, because you're going to always get some value out of him, just you might not get max value. If you have like 2 or 3 30Ks with this guy, or a couple intensifying powers that you can use to shove through for some damage, his value kind of goes up to an 8. So he's somewhere in limbo here. I want to be a little bit more conservative with the ratings in this set overall, because this set is so well designed and almost every card is very good in draft. It's really hard to find cards that are like lower value. Next up is Champa Destruction Perfected. It costs 5. Permanent if there are any red god or alien cards in play in your battle area. Other than this card, it gets plus 6,000 power against double strike and critical. Which almost all of red's cards are either god or alien, and almost all of the reprints are also god or alien. So it's basically, might as well just say, if you have another red battle card that isn't Vegeta or Goku in your battle area, you're getting the bonus. So 5 cost for a 25k double strike critical is absolutely nuts as a finisher in limited, and the fact is, like, he's a rare, so you might actually luck into 2 copies of this card in any given draft, which would really solidify the top end of any aggro deck. He also says when you play this card, choose up to 1 of your opponent's battle cards ignoring barrier, and gets minus 20,000 power for the duration of the turn. So at the worst case, it's 5 cost removal, and removal's sweet in limited. Like, we always want removal. Honestly, like, this card borders somewhere between an 8 and a 9 at minimum. So yeah, it's somewhere around there. If I could give him an 8, he's closer to an 8 than a 9, but like, it's really hard to, I think, for you to not have things go right when you're playing Champa. Like 25k double strike critical and it kills a guy is just great rate for 5. Even if you don't have an alien or god in play, I would still pay 5 for a slightly overstated beater. I mean, I should say it's more like understated, but it's like about on par. 20 is where you usually are with 4 and 5 drops for the most part. So yeah, you get a removal spell plus a decent sized body, so that alone would make it playable. So yeah, like I said, 8.5 roughly for Champa, like leaning closer towards an 8 than a 9. Then we have Champa Destruction Augmented. 3 cost for a 19k, activate battle once per turn and pay 1. Choose 2 cards in your hand and place them in your drop area. Choose all god and alien cards in your battle area and they get plus 10k power and double strike for the duration of the turn. Geez, like, they just want you to win the game off Champa. So this card is basically the leader Gohan from set 7, and you guys remember how insane that leader is in limited. It wasn't quite as good as Kaioken Goku, but when you are looking to push for game, pitching 2 cards from your hand is negligible to give like 4 or 5 attackers plus 10k and double strike. It really puts the game out of reach, and 1 copy of these, like a tech 1 of this card, can just straight up win you the game. 3 cost 19 is also an average rate, so we're at least getting some value out of that. Around 20 power for 3, so pretty good usually. 20k vanilla, like that's like the average like 6 to 7 barrier. So like alone, just on stats, he's getting somewhere around a 6 or a 7 anyway. What really puts him over the top is the fact that he's an Anthem effect that just makes you so that if you are going wide, you just kill your opponent outright. Excellent aggro finisher. I'm going to give Champa an 8. You should definitely, if you're in red and you have a high concentration of Universe 6 cards, you should definitely consider playing at least one of these cards, possibly 2. Next up is Vados Assembled Might. So it is a 7-cost triple attack with Deflect. Auto, your opponent has 4 or more energy. When this card attacks, look at up to 10 cards on the top of your deck. Choose up to 1 red god or alien card with power 19k or less amongst them and play it. Shuffle your deck. Then to start your opponent's next phase, choose up to 1 of your red energy and switch it to active. Okay, so Vados has a really insane effect. Like a really, really insane effect in Limited. And this card honestly should just outright win you the game when you play it. Here's the rub. 7 cost. 7 is borderline unplayable in draft because the format is almost always over between 4 and 6. I think that this card is okay as a high-end, like one of, if you pull it, and you are confident with your amount of blockers and negates that you can actually progress the game to 7. If you actually get this on board and it doesn't just get absolutely blown out by your opponent's removal spell, which, if you guys haven't taken note, most of the removal in this set is at super rare or very high cost main phase only on your opponent's turn. So you're basically in a situation where this card should 9 times out of 10 when you play it resolve, and when it actually resolves 9 times out of 10 you should win the game. But again, 7 cost, and the fact that you might actually not still have any gods or aliens left in the deck this late in the game makes me really, really like not want to give it the highest grade. Also, what really hurts it is at the rare level, the original Vados that had a similar effect to this is also in the set, and that card is much higher to recommend because it's a blowout just like this card is, but it comes down on 5 instead of turn 7. So for that reason, I'm going to give Vados a 6. I think that this card unchecked is basically a 9, like realistically, but we're talking about cards in a vacuum about how good they are first picking, and also how good I think that they are going to be, like how viable I think they will be in any given format. I can't see games going to turn 7 all the time. I want to fill my deck with cards I think will be consistent and useful throughout every game throughout an entire tournament. Next up we have Kaba Surging Forward, 3 costs for a 19k dual attack. This card's Gohan. This card was literally the MVP of set 7. Or set 6, I'm sorry. It's somewhere between a 7 and an 8. I know I popped 8 up there right away, but yeah, it's somewhere right between a 7 and an 8. This is one of the best commons that was in set 6. It is color shifted to red, so if you're in red, you want to be picking up this card and Grandpa Gohan. Like, these are going to be your priority common pickups most of the time. Your deck should have 2 to 3 of this Kaba and 2 to 3 Grandpa Gohans if you really, really can swing it. Caulifla Frenzied Sister, 2-drop for a 15k, activate main, send this card from your drop area to your warp, choose up to 1 red Universe 6 card in your battle area, and it gets plus 5k for the duration of the turn. So I like these kind of cards that have like increasing value. 2 cost for a 15k is good rate. When it dies later on in the game, you get to just remove it from your drop just to give something an extra 5k to push through for more damage. Excellent, excellent common for red aggro decks. I definitely think that if you can get 1 or 2 of these, it would be great. It is at a rare. It is at the rare rarity, which means you're probably only going to see 1 pass to you or open 1 in any given draft, which is a shame. I really wish that this card was at the uncommon rarity, because then you could kind of build around it a little bit more and kind of really lean into that Universe 6 aggro strategy. Next up is Kale Frenzied Sister, 3 cost 15k blocker. Auto, at the end of your turn, switch this card to active mode and it gets plus 5k power until the end of your opponent's next turn. This card is fantastic for a common. So 3 cost 15k is slightly below rate, but if you guys have ever listened to me talk at length about Limited, blockers and negates are what win you games. Because the format there's an abundance of 2 and 3 cost cards that you can just use to aggro your opponent down. Most of the commons will win the game on their own, but most of the defensive options that you can actually play are usually either uncommons or rares, or they're highly contested picks most of the time. So having a blocker at common means you're going to at least see 1 or 2 of these throughout your entire draft. Like, I promise you, if you're really paying attention to the cards that are in the packs that you're opening, you're guaranteed to see at least 2 of this Kale. And since it is a common and it is so good, both offensively and defensively, like 3 cost 20k blocker is huge, and then it can actually get in for profitable damage. Like, this is a card I will pick up early and often. I think it's one of the better cards that you could be playing at common as well. It looks like red is just kind of stacked at 3 drops for draft, but yeah, you can't really go wrong with Kale. And so she gets an 8 in my book. And like I said before, there's so many good cards in Draft Box, it's really hard to find any outliers that you wouldn't want to play. Next up is Kefla, Roar of Destruction, 5 cost for a 20k double strike. Activate battle, pay 2 if you have 4 more energy, and if you have 4 more energy and you choose 2 alien cards in your battle area other than Kefla, Roar of Destruction. Return the chosen cards to the owner's hand, then play this card from your hand, and you can't play battle cards for the duration of the turn. When you play this card, choose it to one of your opponent's battle cards, and it gets minus 20,000 power for the duration of the turn. Okay, so this card's obviously a constructed all-star. It's Doomblade. It's 2 energy to kill something at instant speed during battle. That's really, really good. My gripe with this card is that, as cool as it is that it is a removal spell and it can get rid of problematic stuff, it's a huge tempo loss. You're basically getting a 20k double striker at the loss of 2 battle cards, and they have to be two alien battle cards, which, by the way, like, so if you just don't open aliens, this card is not nearly as good. Paying 5 for 20k double strike is slightly below rate also, so I'm not a big fan of that. And then you also have to wait till turn 4 before this is even live, and you have to hold up at least 2 to use it. So there's a lot of hang-ups on this card, and it makes me not really like it that much for that reason. It's pretty sweet that, like, you can just play it on your opponent's turn, and they can kind of just get, like, faked out by it and killed. But, like, there is quite a lot of setup and a lot that goes into it. This is very much you open this card and you kind of have to be in the right archetype. You can't just, like, first pick this card. I mean, you could pack 1, pick 1 and try and force to go into the strategy, but, like, pack 2, pack 3, pack 4 when you're already in an established strategy. If you don't have an abundance of aliens, then Kefla is pretty much better to pass on at that point. I would give Kefla a 7 for my rating for where I would probably take her, and this is in pack 1, and it would fall probably somewhere to a 6 if we're not in the alien strategy by at least pack 2 or 3, and if we are heavy in the alien strategy by pack 2 or 3, then I would say it's an 8, and I would strongly encourage you to play it. Not saying the card's bad, because I gave it a 7, so it's at least pretty good. It's just that I think that more often than not, this Kefla is going to sit in your hand than actually do what you guys are trying to force her to do, which is the removal during battle. Botama Magetta. Alright, so I'm going to give it a 7. Normally I give 2-drop 20k vanillas an 8 because they're just the best rate, but, like, again, everything in this set is just so insane that I feel like I have to be more conservative with my rates. Just if I give everything an 8, it's just like you guys are going to be like, well, what am I supposed to play then? So, like, I'm trying to give 8s to the cards like, the Kaba and the Grandpa Gohan and stuff, because, like, those are the cards you really should be focusing on and trying to pick up. This is a really good 2-drop. I think it's a little bit worse, actually, than the Caulifla that we talked about above, just because the Caulifla has multi-purpose, multi-utility, which is really, really sweet. Next up is Topo Righteous Aid. So this card is a card that a lot of people were complaining about when it comes to constructed. So it's 4 costs. It's only 1 red, which is pretty sweet because it's pretty splashable. So 4 drop for a 20k. Counter attack. Choose 1 other card in your hand and place it in your drop area. Then negate the attack and play this card. Permanent, if it's your opponent's turn, reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 2. Auto, if it's your opponent's turn, when you play this card for the duration of the turn, your opponent can't attack unless they choose 2 cards from the hand and place it in the drop area each time. So this card is 2 cost, 20k, really good rate, and it's but you have to play it as a negate, and you lose a card from your hand doing so. So yes, negates are really powerful, and I always advocate them, but this is a -2 negate as opposed to a -1. We're talking about from hand, not on board, obviously. It's only a -1 because you're actually getting a card on board, which does have some inherent value. the thing is, like, I feel like if my opponent just jams the topo, I'm just passing my turn. And, like, there's something to be said about that. Like, it's basically a red flying Nimbus at that point. But if you resolve, like, 2 topos in a game, I feel like you're falling behind card advantage-wise. And you really have to make the 20k on it count. He's a really difficult card for me to evaluate, like, correctly without having actually played the set. Like, usually when you sit down and you play the draft, like, there are some cards that might appreciate in value and might be better than you think they are. Because, again, this is my cursory evaluation of how I feel about these cards. Things could change as, you know, strategies develop, or like a card does something or has an unforeseen interaction that I'm not aware of in the card pool. But for right now, I'm leaning on giving Topo, not Toa, a 7. I think that his high points are like in the mid 8s, which is like, you know, he's kind of insane to get this rate. Like, he's basically this card for the same cost, and he negates an attack. Like, that's pretty nuts. But I find that more often than not, what's going to happen is you're going to jam the topo for 2, or you're going to telegraph the topo, and your opponent's just going to play around it, and you're going to minus pretty much for, like, no reason. Like, I feel like limited draw power, your hand sizes don't really get too insane, especially when you consider that every single leader in this format, as far as we know at the time of recording, is the Vegeta, and the Vegeta has critical on the front, which means you're even more stretched than usual in a draft format for hand size. And that's why I think I'm going to give Topo a 7, because I feel like hand management is going to be super critical in this format, and I feel like if your opponent is smart and just, you know, passes when you play the Topo, you don't get anywhere near as much value out of it as people think you will, basically. Alright, Jiren, Shackles of the Past. This card in Constructed is just busted. But we're not here to talk about Constructed. We're here to talk about Limited. So 1 cost for a 5k barrier is bad. But he does have the ability, when you have 10 or more battle cards in your drop area that have 10,000 or more power, at the start of your main phase for the duration of the turn, he gets plus 25k power, double strike, dual attack, and your opponent can't activate counter skills unless they place 2 cards from their hand in the drop area as an additional cost. So, finisher? Like, insane finisher, right? When you actually meet the stipulations. And I feel like you will get 10 in the drop almost always, every game. Like, this is going to go off on, like, turn 5. You basically just jam this guy on 1. And if they don't have, like, a barrier, you know, a card that just kills barrier, which as far as I know, the only ones that do are at the super rare level, you're just going to get a big 30k double strike, dual attack beater. And if they negate, they basically are just throwing away their whole hand to block it. 30k is stupid difficult to block in Limited, because super combos and 10ks are pretty much just non-existent. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any super combos in this set. I mean, not that I can remember since the last time I looked at these cards. So, yeah. You're gonna get a lot of value, like a lot of value out of Jiren. This is a first pick card, and it is a sign you probably should go into red and, you know, aggressively mulligan for him. He's really good even on like turn 3, because you're usually down dropping on for 2 drops at that point. Jiren's just incredible for a rare, both constructed and limited. Next up we have Magadan the Savage Strongman, 3 costs for a 19k, activate battle once per turn. Choose up to 1 Magadan Underling card from your deck, play it, then shuffle your deck. When you have 3 or more Magadan Underling cards in your play in your battle area, at the end of your turn, choose 1 card in your life and add it to your hand. Yep, so this is really weird. This is a build around thing, and this is a rare, so it's like, I guess this is a rare you just kind of take. Like, 3 cost 19k is an okay rate. Like I was saying with Champo, that's going to get you at least a 6 or a 7. And he does have the ability to just tutor out one of these underlings, which is, if I'm not mistaken, is this guy right here. The Magadan underling here, Relentless Horde, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, yeah. It's also an alien, so it is, like, you know, somewhat compatible with Vados. Really, really hard to, like, yeah, like, it's just one of those things where I don't know if I would do it, just because, like, we'll skip ahead to the Magadan underling. If you guys want to know, it's a 2 cost 10k, and you can have as many as you want. And then it has bond to alien, so if you have it and another alien in play, it gets plus 5k power. So it's a 2 cost 15k, and you really have to build around it. I wouldn't be like super enthused with Magadan Underling, like off the bat, unless I had a critical mass of them. And if I did, then I open this, would be pretty good. Like, this is a card where I'm probably leaning on giving it somewhere between like a 5 and a 6, because like it is like 6 to 7 playable, like I said, with Champa, but there's not really like any crazy upside, and your deck really has to be skewed in a particular direction to even get max value out of the card. So, like I said, I'm inclined to give it like a 6 or a 5, just because it's on the lower end of 3 drops, unless you have a critical mass of these underlings. So, yeah, if you have a ton of underlings, sure, go for it. But otherwise, I think I would just pass. Like, this is like a filler card. If it just gets past you and you just happen to be in the red with all the underlings, like, by all means, take it. So Maganon Alien Bonds, activate battle, once per turn bond 2. Alien, you have to have 2 aliens again. It's a 2-drop 10k, which is playable rate around a 4 or 5 usually. Choose up to 1 of your red alien cards in battle, and it gets plus 10k power for the duration of the turn. So you can choose itself with this. So this is a 2-cost 10k. The thing is, it's not as good as our boys Botamo and Magetta here, because these guys are always 20k, both turns, no conditions. So that is a knock against it. That said, it does have some pretty unique upsides, whereas if you have something like, say, a Jiren, you know, on board, you can just pay, or you activate the bond ability, and just give the Jiren an extra 10k, so he becomes a 40k bomb. So this card has a lot more utility than meets the eye, but it's very build around, and you kind of need to make sure you have a critical mass of good aliens, so you need to make sure you're opening cards like Jiren and Vados and Kefla. Like, if you're not going to be opening those kinds of cards, this card is best left out of your deck. If you are not heavy in aliens, I'd give it a 5. If you are heavy in aliens, I would give it a 7. My 7 button is broken today. Yes, I'd give it a 7. So we already discussed the Maganon Underling Relentless Horde. It's just a 2-cost 15k. You know, when you satisfy the condition, which isn't quite as good as it could be. So I'm going to give it somewhere between a 4 and a 5. You really, to make me want to consider it playable, you really have to open that one rare that we were just talking about. So next up is Niagara Drop, which is a 2-cost activate battle. If your leader card is a red Saiyan, which it will be, because that's all we have in this draft box, choose one of your leader cards or battle cards, and for the duration of the turn, that card gets plus 5k power. Then if your life is 3 or less and it's your opponent's turn, choose up to 1 of your red energy, switch to active mode, and draw 1 card. 2-cost Senzu Bean without the untap leaves a lot to be desired. This is a card where I think I would sideboard it in against an opponent if they are playing me with a bunch of 2-drop Weenie Rush. Like, if they don't have any real finishers, and their only real way to win the game is to just go wide off 15 and 20Ks, I would strongly consider bringing this card in. I don't think I would main deck this card, though. It just feels really situational. You have to be at 3 or less life to really get max value out of the card, and you're basically at that point paying 1. It's like you're playing Senzu Bean, but you don't get the untap, but you get to replenish the card. Like, it's not the greatest card. Like, I'm going to give it a 4. I think you should definitely side this card in if your opponent is playing something that's like crazy aggressive in limited. If they have a bunch of like 30Ks though, this card is not saving you. Next up is Gallic Cannon. Counterplay: when the battle card is played, choose to one of those battle cards, and it gets minus 15k power for the duration of the turn. So you guys are like, man, this card's insane in Constructed, right? This is what puts red over the top. I've heard it like time and time again. I think the card is good in Constructed. I don't actually even think this card is that good at all in Limited. Like, it is a removal spell, but the thing is, it only kills things that you don't care about. Like, just real quick, just progressing up, like, it doesn't kill most of the 3-drops. It doesn't kill Jiren. It doesn't kill Topo. It doesn't kill Botamo. It doesn't kill Kefla. It doesn't kill Kale. Caulifla thanks you for giving her value. It doesn't kill Kaba. Doesn't kill the Grandpa Gohan. Doesn't kill Vados or the reprint Vados. So yeah, what does it do? Absolutely, like, not nothing, but it's this is a card where you only draft it, I think, if you're in the money business. Like, this is what we talk about, money drafting. If your goal is to win the tournament, then don't draft this card. If your goal is to just make money or like bling out your Constructed deck, then absolutely take this card. I'm going to give it a 4. This is a side deck card, and for just like Niagara Drop, you're only going to side it in if your opponent's just playing like a 15k powered Dork Rush. Like, there's so many better cards I feel like you could be playing than Gallic Cannon. Alright, so that leaves us with the reprints. I'm not going to use the fancy dancy score for this one, I will just verbally communicate it to you guys, but we will go through it. So first up is Kaba, Universe Mediator. He's the one from Tournament Power, looks at top 3 for a U6 card. Just like all of these cards in this cycle, somewhere between a 5 and a 6 for rating, because you have to have critical mass for me to want to play it. You need at least 7 targets for me to really advocate playing Kaba, Universe Mediator. Transcendent Strike. 1 cost to kill one of your opponent's guys. 20 your list is actually pretty fantastic. Especially in this format, because most of the threats are 20k. They're over 15k. They're between 16 and 20k for the most part. So this will kill a good portion of problems that you can't deal with. So for that reason, I would give Transcendent Strike somewhere between a 7 and an 8. It is actually worth playing as a 1x, and it is significantly better than Gallic Cannon in almost every matchup. Next up is After Image Technique. It's not quite a negate, but it is, you know, going to get the job done versus some of the things. It won't save you like a true negate, though, which is reserved for an 8. So I would give After Image somewhere around a 7. Intensifying Power Trunks. It is a 15k crit. It draws you a card, and it is, you know, just all around good at every point in the game. It helps you self-awaken too, which is pretty sweet. Just like all of these take a life to get plus 10k and do something, I'm going to give it an 8 because it's just always good. It's pretty much the benchmark for 1-drops is this card. Botamo of Universe 6. Blockers are a premium in this. You definitely do not want to, you know, short yourself when it comes to blockers and negates, because there's just not a lot of them to go around. And like I said, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, in the comments, let me know, but I don't think there's any super combos in the set, which means it's even more difficult than usual to actually protect your life. So draft Botamo early and draft him often. That's why I give him an 8. Sister Attack Saiyan Kale. 2-drop 10k is a really bad rate. However, if you are in the Universe 6 deck, she gets a significant boost because she becomes a 15k that draws us a card. So that lands Kale somewhere around a 7 if you are in the U6 deck. If you're not, then it's like a 3 or a 4. Dark Duo Bobbity. Speaking of a 3 or a 4, I don't think there's pretty much any reason for you to ever really want to play this card. Yeah. I know when you play it, you get to untap a red battle card with 15k or more power, but I don't know. I just don't see it. I feel like the 2-drop that gives a red alien 10k power is more useful in more situations than Bobbity. That said, there are more premium targets for Bobbity in this format than World Martial Arts Tournament. And while I did give him somewhere between, like, I think a 2 and a 4 in that format, I think I'd give him somewhere between a 4 and a 5 because he actually would be a pretty decent tech option to just kind of use him one time to untap your super rare to go for game. So, like, he's a little bit better there. But I still would err on the side of not, you know, the caution of just not wanting to play this card. A 3 cost for 5k does not excite me at all. I already have to have something in play to get, you know, good value out of it. Impeccable Super Saiyan Kaba. Yeah, so your opponent can't activate counter against this, and if your leader's a Red Saiyan, which it will be, it gets plus 5k for the turn. This is the rare from Tournament of Power. So it is a 20k almost every time because, again, as far as I know, this is the only draft leader, this Vegeta you see here on your screen on the left, that you can actually play, and he is considered to be rainbow color. He's all colors at all times. So yeah, he's a 20k, and your opponent can activate counter against it. However, there is a distinct lack of counters outside of the standard, like, shocking negates, as far as I know, or sparking negates. So, yeah, I think it's probably somewhere around a 6 or a 7. Like, it's decent. It's pretty much like average. Like, it's mostly a 3 cost 20k vanilla most of the time you play. It's never going to really have its additional effect. A significantly better 3-drop for you to play would be Grandpa Gohan. 3-drop 30ks are format defining. If your color doesn't have a 3 cost 30k, you're behind the curve. You really need to be drafting as many of these as you can get. Do not let these pass you by when you're drafting. The only reason you probably should be passing these cards is for desperately needed negates or some kind of super rare or rare bomb that wins you the game on the spot. So speaking of cards that win you the game on the spot, Fearless Pan is a 3 cost 15k barrier blocker that gives your whole board plus 5k and double strike. So Anthem effects, like we talked about with Champa, already get you somewhere around an 8 because they close out games. You mean to tell me this card protects my life also and is a relevant attacker and it can't be removed from the board? Okay, yeah, sign me up. I'm going to say Fearless Pan's a 9. Iron Wall Magetta, 3 cost 15k is not the worst rate. However, your opponent can't get rid of this card unless they have a card like Transcendent Strike or they have some kind of super rare bomb. So Iron Wall Magetta is here to basically just grind your opponent out. There's nothing they can really do about this card. This is just like a 15k indestructible that is just going to just keep beating into them repeatedly turn after turn, and it's going to just chew through a ton of cards in their hand. Magetta is made for limited. I'm going to give him an 8. He is definitely like an all-star for anyone who's played him in Cube or in Set 1 draft format. He is like MVP because your opponent just can't deal with it. Dark Duo Deborah. It's foreseeing hit. This is not. 4 cost 20k with no extra, relevant stats. I mean, yes, it has barrier, but like no actual like offensive keywords to help it out. Really hurts it. And 20k at 4. Most of the, I'm sure you've noticed now, most of the 3s are pushing around 20k, and almost all of the 4s are. So this guy, even though he nets 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, unless he sets up a game-winning strike, he's not really winning you the game as much as you think. I've soured on this card a little bit since World Martial Arts Tournament. I gave it an 8 there and was like, hey, this is like the best card ever. It just kind of wins you games. But like I said before, when you play cards and you actually like start exploring the format, you start to realize like the card is a little bit more fragile than I originally gave it credit, and all it takes is your opponent to just go, okay, well, it's my turn 5 now. I'll just drop my bomb, kill Deborah, get my cards back. Thanks. Like, sick turn, guy. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to give Deborah a 7. Still definitely worth playing, but it is not the powerhouse that, many, and myself included, thought it would be. Pride and Justice Topo. I think this is a significantly better Topo for you to pick up than the new one, because he doesn't minus you 1 from your hand, and he usually is 2, and he's a board clear. If your opponent is gassed out and doesn't have cards, Topo is just going to win you the game by himself. So for that reason, I'm going to give him a high 8. I can't really give him a 9 because he doesn't just win the game outright on his own, but this is probably amongst the best negates you can probably have in the entire format. Next up is Universe 7 Saiyan Prince Vegeta. This is another card that just didn't really get a fair shake, and this is a card that's just kind of built for limit. This is what you want in a finisher, somewhere between an 8 and a 9 for score. He's just a huge triple striker and makes another character a huge triple striker. Like, it should just close out the game when you play this Vegeta. I'm leaning more towards a soft 9, more so than 8. So yeah, definitely think that this is a really strong finisher, and it's probably the super rare that you, aside from Pan, that you really want to open in red when you're looking for a way to close out the game. I think this is probably the premium finisher for red in the format. Next up, we have Untapped Power SS3 Son Goku. So he's a 5 cost, and then basically when you play him, you get to switch an energy to active mode, and he gets plus 5k power for the turn, and you get to draw a card. So you can do a lot worse than this card. Like, 5 cost 25k, it's basically 4, you have to have 5 energy, so it's a 4 cost 25k single strike that draws you a card. Is good, but you have to wait till turn 5 to play it, and at that point we're looking to close out the game with big guys like Vegeta, or the next card we'll talk about, Vados. So I'd probably give this Goku somewhere around a 6 or a 7. Solid, like, top-end filler if you just don't have anything better. And finally, we have Bewitching God Vados, who I think is significantly better than the other 7-drop Vados. So this card comes down on 5 instead of on turn 7. Has dual attack, and you get to look at the top 3 cards for an alien with 15k or less and play them. Yeah, so this just kind of just cranks out, Kales, Cauliflas, Magettas, Kabas. It's gonna find you 2 other cards to punch through. Like, Vados is basically just 4 damage in a can for 5, and if you don't win somehow, like, you have a huge board. You have a board in a can. She's army in a can. You're just gonna get one every turn. I'm gonna give Vados a 9. I think this was a constructed all-star back in set 1. If it wasn't for Cold Bloodlust, I think that the entire format would eventually have centralized around this card in set 1. Just because I think it's one of the best rares from that set, and it's just really powerful, really powerful and limited. Like, you have to have a really good reason to not take Vados, and like I said with Kefla, if you're really not in the alien stack and it's like pack 4 or 5 and you just don't have a lot of targets, then I could see you passing it. But pack 1, pick 1, Vados is a very strong candidate. I would take over a lot of other cards in the set. So there you go, guys. That is the red review. Next time we'll be talking about the blue cards, including the reprints. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, like I said, please leave a like and a comment below. If you really enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, and staying up to date with us here at 3XG Productions. Alright, guys, I'm tongue-tied. That was a lot of talking. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.